So, hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining. And welcome to another year of Badass Women Entrepreneurs. My name's Ngazi, and I'm a volunteer with Women in Science Portland, and I'm here with my colleague Trisha. So, 4 years ago, we partnered Virtue Lab's mission to fund and support clean tech startups and innovators, with WIS's mission to support the development, retention, and promotion of women in sciences, in hopes of creating an event that could inspire, motivate, and support founders and women inventors in the STEM community. BWE has become an annual event for us to come together and gives us an opportunity to share some of the stories of really amazing women in the Pacific Northwest who are kicking ass, growing their business, and also dig into some of the funding mechanisms that have been helpful to them and to others. This is also meant to be a community building event until we can come together again in person, hopefully next year. Um, and so I really want to thank you all for joining remotely and still committing to this hour and a half long event. Make sure that you join the speed networking after this. It's just 3 minutes each. You can commit to that and meet some really cool people. So over to you, Trisha.
Be sure and join us in that in the short 3-minute super speed networking. We kind of joke around that even an introvert should be able to hang around for 3 minutes to kind of meet folks, and it'll just be one-on-one, and then we'll circulate through that. So let's meet our moderator, Lindsay Murphy. I've known Lindsay now for about 3 years. We actually met her and she was a panelist on this event, and she was absolutely fire. We loved her energy. So we brought her back as a moderator. And if you haven't met Lindsay already, she's got a super awesome YouTube channel, really geared towards kids. It takes simple ideas, simple science ideas, and it puts it into kind of real life DIY or DIY stuff that they can do with their family. It's super awesome. Check that out. And prior to that, she had 15 years in marketing. She worked with some like really big names, Wieden and Kennedy, MTV, Nike, some other ones. She's an absolute powerhouse. So welcome, Lindsay. It's awesome to see you again.
Hi, Trisha. Thank you so much. Welcome to absolutely every one of you that are tuning in, wherever you are tuning in from. And I believe we have a poll question. Where are you tuning in from? I would love to hear and see, or just drop it in the chat. If there is no poll question, let me know where you are. I'm going to guess Portland, Oregon. But if there's anything else out there, please let me know. I would love to welcome you. I'm so excited to be a part of this for the 4th year, but the 3rd year officially hosting. It's been so fun that it is so easy to say yes every year. So thanks so much to Trisha and Cassidy and the entire Women in Science PDX team and Virtue Lab for making sure this keeps going every year. So the Badass Women Entrepreneurs panel, I am so excited to get into it. Before I do, I have to give you a quick warning. Behind all this beautiful Zoom backgrounding is a very new apartment that has a dining room table coming in. So if in a couple minutes it gets noisy and crazy back there, that is why. Please forgive me. But I would love to welcome one of the most incredible women, I think, in doing it in science right now. Rachel Dreilinger is the founder and CEO of Neuromedica. She's a native biomedical engineer, a member of the Dene Navajo Nation, and an entrepreneur with more than 21 years of experience in startups, consulting, lab automation, and medical device development. Rachel loves working with surgeons and clinicians to solve healthcare challenges and improve the lives of patients while reducing the overall healthcare cost. Neuromedica is an OHSU startup that is focused on the development of a novel bioabsorbable surgical clip for the durotomy closure in the spinal surgery. Rachel is interested in supporting more natives in the STEM space, as well as the business community. Welcome to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. Thanks for doing my intro. That's awesome. And it's durotomy. You were super close.
Well, that actually leads into my first question for you. Yeah. Can you tell me what durotomy is and why a bioabsorbable clip for surgical closure is important?
Sure. So the dura mater is the membrane that covers the brain and spinal cord, and it houses the cerebrospinal fluid. So in cranial surgery, brain surgery, or spinal surgery, if that dura is opened, the CSF comes flowing out. And typically the dura is closed using suture. So you're using a needle and thread to puncture a watertight membrane, and then it leaks and leaks and leaks. So this is a clip that quickly goes on in a fraction of the time, closes the incision, and then it dissolves. It disappears from the body over time.
How did you come to find out that that was necessary? What was it about that particular challenge in the medical field did you get that light bulb from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a biomedical engineer, but I am not a doctor. I'm not a neurosurgeon. So it's not really something I would come up with. One thing that I do as a biomedical engineer is I work with clinicians and doctors and dentists. They're the ones with the ideas. So a lot of people come to me with their ideas, and then I can just sort of take the idea and run with it, develop designs, prototypes, we test it. And in the case of Neuromedica, we founded a company around the technology.
Very cool. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And then next we have the fabulous Miss Paula Hayes, who is a product chemist and woman of color who is inspired by the challenge of finding quality cosmetics in complexions that complemented us. Personally aware of the beauty industry's limited makeup options for her and women like us, Paula embarked on a mission to rethink cosmetic formulations and put multicultural women at its center. Her goal is to create products calibrated to interact well with darker complexions and to develop trusted products for their incredible, consistent, high quality. Hi, Paula.
Hey, Lindsay. Thanks for that introduction.
So will you, I don't think I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Pretty low. While Paula gets her sound just a little bit higher so we can hear all the awesome things she has to say, just a quick shout out to Milwaukee, Oregon, Corvallis, Seattle, Washington, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. Shout out to you. Hi.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Perfect.
Awesome.
Hi, Paula. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Okay, so I love makeup and I love science and chemistry. So I'm super obsessed with you. We've met a couple of times. I'm so excited to finally get the chance to do an interview of sorts with you. Will you tell me more about Hue Noir? So I love, like, what makes Hue Noir so important? As a fellow Black woman, I can pontificate about that. But what is it about darker skin complexions and how makeup has been done in the past that has not been conducive for making standard products conducive for all?
Yeah, that's actually a really important question. And of course, it's one that a lot of people don't think about. But product development is, such a unique type of chemistry because it's not just coming to a solution that works to solve one particular problem. You're also taking into consideration all those intangibles that have to be addressed. And one of the intangibles when it comes to makeup is color. When you add color into any system, it is inherently hard. It does not come out the way you think it's going to come out. The chemistry is a lot more complex. And spending so many years as a product development chemist, I can tell you that often in the R&D cycle, you are pressured just to get product out there. So there are some things that you often leave set aside because you just can't get to those solutions. And the shades that are needed for darker skin tones, unfortunately, is one of those things. And so I knew it could be addressed. I know it just takes a lot more patience and a lot more development. And I was committed to answering that call, because when you have people who are spending money on products that they want to perform for them, and when it comes to makeup, there's an emotional attachment, and we all want to put our best selves forward. And so I wanted to create products that not only said we were going to do that, but to own the process so that we really delivered on that promise. Uh-oh, I think you're muted now.
I was just saying, I saw Rachel over there nodding in agreement. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Paula. So the next and the one to round out our awesome panel is Cami Semick. She is the founder and CEO of Food for All, a former technology worker turned competitive ultra marathon runner. Oh my gosh. She turned back to technology to bring communities better food. Cami wanted to buy meat locally, but she was having a hard time hunting down local ranchers, having to go through the word of mouth process just to find one willing to sell her meat. So she and her husband co-founded Food for All, which enables farmers and buyers to transact in their local area, as well as help ranchers and other farmers to sustain profitable businesses. That is incredible. Cami, thank you so much. I would love to hear a little bit more about that experience of what it took to find someone to give you fresh meat and how that bloomed into this idea.
Well, yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for having me. Yeah, well, you know, I am just kind of thinking about my route back to starting Food for All, my company. And, you know, it really started back when I was working in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was working in the realm of business development, working for large companies. And at that time, you know, I somewhat hit a bit of a glass ceiling. So, you know, I was at the director level, kind of pushing up into the vice president level. And there was a specific opportunity where there was a vice president level position open, and I had other vice presidents sponsoring me to get up into that role. And unfortunately, the decision maker decided to bring in a friend instead of bringing in myself, who was the qualified person for the position. And probably like a lot of us, I became really frustrated, and I had a baby, right? So from there, after about a year of being a mother, I was looking for opportunities to kind of flex my skills. And that's where this opportunity of being a professional distance runner fell into my lap. It really kind of married a lot of different skills for me. And I had this amazing opportunity to travel around the world, being an advocate for a specific brand, and then be able to compete in these, larger events. But then as a competitor, in order to really optimize myself, I needed, the best sources of nutrition. And so we were growing a lot of our own vegetables. And then that's where my desire was to go and to seek out high quality meat sources. And, being in Central Oregon, we have all of these ranches around us, but being actually able to find a rancher who is willing to sell you, a half of a beef or a box of beef or whatever it is, proved to be very difficult. And so that's where this opportunity came together, in that, I had a desire. I love the process of working, and I love the process of working hard. And so I wanted to take those skills from, my years in technology, and then this drive that I have, not only to feed myself better food, but to then open that up to the broader community. And so, that really was the start of Food for All. And we're really excited to kind of be at this intersection of local food and technology, and opportunity right now.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much, Cami. So for each of you, I would love to hear more. And each of you touched on this a little bit in terms of how the idea turned into the business. But can you talk to me about when you started that idea, that transition from idea to startup? Where did you go to educate yourself? When you realized that you might need some funding to get started, what were the steps that you took? Who were the people that you reached out to? What were the things that you put in place? And then, of course, is it just you? Was it just you? Talking about your partnerships and things like that. I would love to hear what those early stages of your business looked like in terms of team formation and of course, the fundraising piece. I'd love to hear from you, Rachel. And then Paula, it'd be great for you to.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course. So I'm a biomedical engineer. I'm not an MBA. I, have had some companies, but I don't have that really, or now at the time I didn't have that really strong business background. And I think one thing I like to tell people and talk about is how important mentors and the helpers around you are. So our company came out of OHSU. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, good. So my company was founded on a technology out of OHSU. So OHSU had a lot of resources of people I could go talk to and get help from. They have a tech transfer department. In general, I have a lot of business advisors and mentors who have helped me tremendously, especially at the beginning when you kind of feel like to some extent you don't know what you're doing. You're coming on as CEO of a company. That wasn't something that was my lifelong dream. It was something I sort of was pushed into by people who believed in me. So that was super duper important. What was the other part of your question? It was like the early stages and how you got started. You mentioned something about funding.
Yeah, I think dipping the toe into funding. And actually, I would love, before you move on to that, I would love to hear from Paula. Same question. And for those of you in the audience, as we listen to these awesome innovators, tell us about the stages of business that they had been and are moving into. I would love to hear about what stage your business might be in right now. I think just more than half of you who are joining us identify as innovators or entrepreneurs. So I would love to hear about what stage your business is in. Go ahead and put that in the chat. But Paula, I would love to hear, same question. What were those steps that you took? And then, yeah, go ahead if you can remember to enter into the conversation around funding, and then we'll kick back to you, Rachel, and get to you, Cami.
Right. So I actually, gosh, the early days. I am a product development chemist with an MBA. I got the MBA primarily because I wanted to know how to run a business. I had this concept, I had this idea, but I didn't know what was next. And outside of having a lot of people professionally who knew product development, I didn't know many people who had the business side. But again, I had gone back to school to kind of figure that out. So it all started while I was working full time, and just initially the first step, right? Just writing a business plan, starting to lay out what I thought was possible for my business. And then I sat on it for quite a while. I think I was afraid to get started. I was really afraid of the unknown. And then at some point, I heard a quote. It was a Walt Disney quote about the way to get started is to quit talking about it and just to do it. And I was at that point in my career. So I took a leap, and early funding was really me just taking some of the bonuses that I had gotten when I worked in product development, because I worked on projects for large Fortune 500 companies, and I kind of stashed a lot of that away. And I just figured out that opening plan. What did I need to kind of even have the basics to start my quote unquote lab, even though that lab was out of my kitchen to start with. And I wanted to get to a point of proof of concept. And so I just decided, like a marathon, Cami, I'm sure you can relate to this. I've run a couple, but nothing like you, girl. It's all one foot in front of the other. You can't see the finish line. And so I decided to approach the business the same way. So I started bootstrapping, and then got it to a point where I felt like I could prove up the concept. And then I started to go after angel funding and equipment loans because I needed equipment to build a pilot plant.
And what was that experience like? So when you realized that you needed angel investors, you needed equipment grants, what did you just, were you like laying in bed Googling and you just putting in the keywords? Like what did it look like to actually find those resources?
Well, you know what? I started with, honestly, I started with the bank. And I know that's not, it's not conventional, but I had to be able to figure out not only what I needed, but how I was going to get it. I did a lot of networking. I had a lot of resources from the industry in general, contractors, um, equipment manufacturers who helped me figure out the exact space I needed, what I needed, how I could go from zero to, a certain level of making product. And so I kind of built all that into my plan. And then I went to the bank. First Bank kind of laughed me out the door. I am like all scientists, I am a detailed person. So my business plan was on point. And to see them kind of toss it to the side and say, yeah, no, we don't do consumer goods, was disheartening, but I just kept at it and I found a bank that was willing to at least give me the equipment loan. But then it was setting up the facility, getting it to a point where we could run and make products here. My husband, who is my silent partner, was a big help in the early funding to do all that. But then I had shiny equipment and nothing to put in it. So then that's where I had to start to seek out angel investors. And a lot of it initially was that true friend and families round. Just people who believed in my concept and who were willing to throw their hat in the ring to help me.
Rachel, similar story?
Yeah, I have to say that the fundraising piece of having a startup has been the absolute hardest part and has taken the longest and has sort of made, the engineering part and the development part take a lot longer because sometimes you're just sitting there waiting for funding. So I founded this company, me and my co-founder, Dr. Neil Roundy, founded this company in 2014. And to date, we've raised $3.6 million. And we have raised money from a variety of sources, from grants, a lot of grants, and then also investors. So we got an early grant, like a seed stage grant from OHSU just to develop the very initial technology. And that was even before the company was founded. And then after it was founded, we got an investment from Onami. Was sort of an Oregon group that invests in early companies. And then we were fortunate to get an SBIR, National Science Foundation, SBIR phase 1, which led to an NIH, so that's a National Institutes of Health, SBIR phase 2 grant, and that grant was $1.5 million, which was phenomenal. And then, so you mentioned before this all started to have a piece of news that's exciting news, we just raised $1 million in January. So that money should get us through launch. We want to launch by the end of this year. So just raising money is so hard. It's so much work. And you definitely need a lot of help and guidance and just temerity. Just pursue every funding option possible. And that's what that was part of my strategy, is just apply for a lot of different funding.
I wish I had like a popper or some sort of like virtual screen celebration.
Yeah, it was huge. It's so stressful. It's so stressful raising money. And then the part where you're like, in 6 months, maybe you don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, just raising money is challenging, but it's pretty exciting to get, especially when you get investors who really believe in you too. So that part is wonderful.
I love that. That's a really great segue to my last question for the panel. If you are watching and you have any questions, please don't be afraid to put them in the chat. I will be looking for them just after our next panel when we have both the investors and the entrepreneurs on the same panel. I will go back and find questions. So feel free to, as you think of them, put your questions in the chat box. And if it's for a specific entrepreneur, feel free to add their name. So Rachel, what you're saying, what a huge, exhilarating win. And just within the industry, it's a big deal. So congratulations. For each of you, Rachel, I'll start with you. If I could get maybe like 45 to 90 seconds of, you know, lessons learned for, again, thinking back to how you built your companies. What would you have done differently? How you went about fundraising the first time or the first couple of times. If you could go back and talk to your past self, just at that kitchen table, about to hit enter on that business license or that website launch or whatever it is, launching their business, would you have talked yourself out of it or into it? And what aspect do you wish you had learned sooner? That was a mouthful, so if you need any help, I'm happy to recap that question. But for all of you, I would love to hear what you would say to your past self, just getting ready to embark on this journey.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I don't want to discourage anyone, but you know, part of me is like, don't do it because it's so much work. But it's, I think Paula was mentioning the marathons, and I've written about this before, that doing a startup company is like running 60 marathons in a row. So you have a goal and you have something you're trying to achieve, and you get it done, and it's really hard. It's a lot of work. And then right when you're done, there's just another one and another one and another one. So I love what Paula said, which is, you know, obviously you have to do broad thinking and overall thinking and have this overarching vision for where you're going. But then day to day, it's like you just focus on what you can get done in that day and try not to get too overwhelmed by the amount of work, and just, you know, all of the things that you have to manage. I'm, you know, running a company. I'm still doing engineering. I'm co-founder and CEO, but I also have to manage the patent development, the sales and marketing aspect, all the financial stuff, the fundraising, every aspect of the company, you know, regulatory, quality, everything. And so that just kind of becomes overwhelming. So try not to think too hard and talk yourself out of it. Get the help you need and really lean on mentors. When you don't know what you're doing, you have that feeling of like, what's happening? Get help. Just ask for help from others. Was that 90 seconds?
It was perfect. Paula, I would love to hear your thoughts around that. Did you need me to rephrase that question or just restate it?
Yeah, that would be good. That was a long one.
So we're just looking to hear about, you know, talking back to your past self. If you could go back and do something differently, what would you do differently? And, you know, yeah, what would you do differently? Things that you've learned, lessons learned.
Wow. I think I would just simply tell myself that it can be done, period, that it is going to be a lot of work, as Rachel said. And yes, to not think that once you got over one hurdle, that there wasn't going to be another one there, but that you are strong enough, capable enough to tackle it, but to just focus on the day to day, to not get overwhelmed. I also think I might have pursued outside investment a little earlier. Even though it is extremely, extremely hard and extremely time consuming, I had this concept because of a lot of the feedback that I was getting that I had to be far along in the whole proof of concept to prove up so that I could take away some of the risk for some of the investors. But I realized in the course of raising funds, there's always something that they're going to question. So I might just, you know, I might have gone for it a little bit earlier in larger amounts. I also really had the mentality of only wanting enough, like not wanting to ask for too much, if that makes sense. Wanting to make sure that I was tackling the things that needed to be tackled over the next 12 to 18 months and to only ask for what I need. And what I've recently heard from mentors as I'm, you know, at this point of really scaling the business is, yeah, ask for what you need and then ask for another blank percent because you just need to do it. That advice would have been really, really helpful for early stage Paula.
I think I heard someone say, and I didn't actually get this until maybe like last year or so, but I heard this for years. Whatever you think the number is, double it and add 20%.
Exactly. Yes.
And I can attest, without even a single fail that has always been true. The number that I thought was absolutely outrageous was peanuts and totally irrational when compared to what I was actually wanting or needing to do.
Exactly.
Cami, I'd love to hear from you. Lessons learned.
Yeah, I would say, would I do this again? Absolutely. I mean, the journey is very rewarding. And every step of the journey is, as Paula and Rachel have said, I mean, it is really difficult, but I feel like it's worth the effort. Timing is everything as well. I know specifically for my company, when we spoke with angel investors a couple of years ago, and I kid you not, like they would say, who would ever want to buy directly from a farmer? Like that, is that even a thing? And so all of a sudden, exactly, COVID happens, and here is this wave of transformation that's taking place in our food systems, and we're really well positioned in order to answer that need. And so, so I think timing is everything. But also, again, what Paula and Rachel said, I mean, there's stepping stones, and you've got to, we've been partnering with Virtue Labs, which has helped us get access to funding that we may not have otherwise had access to. And so I think reaching out and networking and looking at the resources that are available around you, and making those relationships.
Fantastic. Audience members, if you have any questions that were stirred up in the last session, please make sure you are entering them in the chat box. I would love to ask them during the Q&A that's going to come up after the next panel, which is our funding and resources panel with Himalaya Rao Patlapali and Leon Wolf, who is an old friend of the Badass Women Entrepreneurs panel. So first, we're going to look at a video. We have one by Mercy Corps that I'm very excited to get into.
Mercy Corps Northwest proudly serves as home to the Oregon's only women's business center in partnership with the Small Business Administration. The mission of our center is to elevate women entrepreneurs by offering education, financing, and counseling to support the growth of small businesses. Oregon's Women's Business Center believes in the power of women to create a vibrant and equitable local economy. Our center is open to women, gender non-conforming individuals, and men. Our center offers classes that take new entrepreneurs through the process of starting and growing a business. We offer a business foundations curriculum for those in the early stages and seminars on business topics like branding, financing, and operations. We provide one-on-one counseling to entrepreneurs on everything from record keeping to legal support. We also offer special events throughout the year, including women's speed mentoring and small business pitch competitions that give entrepreneurs an opportunity to learn from one another, elevate small business, and build community. And our annual holiday market showcases the talented makers from all over the Pacific Northwest while encouraging buyers to shop local. Mercy Corps Northwest has supported entrepreneurs across the Pacific Northwest with business financing and education for the past 20 years. In Oregon and Washington, we offer a loan program that serves underfunded businesses. We also offer small business grant programs that support low-income entrepreneurs, including those recovering from economic shock like COVID. Each year, hundreds of local entrepreneurs come through our doors, growing their own network and building a tight-knit community of passionate and creative small business owners. We invite you to explore the many programs we offer to both startups and existing businesses in person and online.
Major shout of thanks to Mercy Corps Women in Business Center. The next video is going to be Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability.
Hi, my name is Lisa Ann Pinkerton, founder and chairwoman of Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, and thank you for inviting us to be a part of this event. We are a networking organization focused on supporting women and men in their career paths to build a green economy. This manifests itself in weekly or monthly events, and we have all virtual events right now, so you're welcome to join us from your living room if you'd like. So anybody can join our organization as an attendee, or you can become a member. We also have corporate members, companies like GE, Canadian Solar, First Solar. We're also very well known for a big TED style conference that we give every year in the San Francisco Bay Area called WCS Talks. That's hosted by Google. We're very proud of that. It's our flagship event, and we use it as our annual fundraiser. I welcome you to go to our website and learn more about what we do, watch our videos, follow us on social media, and get involved. We're here to have fun as well as growing our professional careers, and we look forward to you being part of our community. Thank you very much.
Shout out to them. Alrighty, so next up, we're going to have a really thrilling conversation on how you can fund your business earlier on. Early funding can range from using your own money, like lines of credit, to crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, microloans, and even stretching into grants, funding from angel investors, and of course, venture capital. I'm going to chat with a couple of folks who know a lot about the federal funding opportunities, seed funds, and venture capital. I am so excited to introduce you to Himalaya Rao Patlapalli. She is with the Portland Seed Fund and Black Founders Matter. She is a fund manager, a venture capital consultant, Himalaya provides comprehensive and consistent due diligence analysis on prospective investments. It means she dissects whether or not they should be funded or not. At the Portland Seed Fund, she sources and screens investment opportunities and is currently fundraising for Black Founders Matters first round. Welcome to you, Himalaya.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It's exciting to be here.
You'll have to forgive me. I love to say your third name. It's my favorite. So Himalaya Rao. Before we introduce Leon, will you tell me a little bit about how you entered the funding industry? I've always been so interested to know that about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. My journey into venture capital is so different than what most people think of. I actually was a social worker in the Bronx. And so my wife and I are from the East Coast. And so my heart is always with social work, and it's in everything that I do. And it was actually there that I started to see the inequities between what we believe and who we believe can be successful and the pathways that they can take. And when I started to read all of these articles by Harvard Business Review on who could be entrepreneurs and the qualities that it takes to be a successful entrepreneur, and I was looking around in the communities that I was advocating within, particularly within Hunts Point in the Bronx, I saw all of those characteristics, resourcefulness, resilience, being able to pivot, being able to be cash flow efficient, right? And so it really generated within me, I think, this passion, this lifelong passion that's always stuck with me, that many different people can be entrepreneurs, can be successful, and it actually can be a pathway towards economic development and opportunities. And so I've utilized my life in that sense to be able to give access of capital to different types of founders and to diversify the types of deals that get looked at and funded. And so how I got into this, I actually didn't know anything about business. When I was doing my MBA, someone talked to us about entrepreneurship, and I realized, like, oh, an entrepreneur is just a person who's just trying to figure it out. Oh, well, that's me too, right? And so my wife and I decided to start a company, and we did that. It was such a great learning experience, really exposed us to the ecosystem of Oregon. And then from there, someone asked me if I was going to raise capital, and I didn't know anything about that, right? Because my family doesn't come from business. And they were like, oh yeah, someone called a venture capitalist can give you money. And so I actually initially saw that there was a fund with my university that I was getting an MBA that was focused in angel financing. And I was like, I think I just want to understand from a perspective, like a student perspective, if I'm ever going to go and be judged and evaluated, I want to understand the grading rubric so I can understand how to, capture my voice in a way that will be received well. And so initially I just went to understand that. And it was there that I realized that for me was the perfect merge between social work and business, because it gave me the ability to advocate for different types of startups and also have the inclusion of people not only that were diverse through their cultural identity, but also diverse in their socioeconomic background. And for me, that was so important. And that's why I've stayed in this space. That's why I've continued to advance in this space. And that's why I do the work I do now with Black Founders Matter.
Amazing. Awesome, Himalaya. Thank you so much. Next up, like I said, we've seen him time after time. Hi, Leon.
Hi, Lindsay.
Leon Wolf with Virtue Lab, one of our incredible partners in throwing this incredible event every year. Leon assists Oregon tech companies to win grants, large grants, from an annual bucket of over $4 billion non-dilutive federal R&D dollars. He has helped over 100 companies and organizations to prepare for the SBIR and STTR and other proposals to the USDA, the NSF, the NIH, EPA, and the DOE. He's delivered dozens of training sessions for funding. And of course, he is so generous with our time. And I would love to tell you, if you don't know who this man is, you must take this opportunity right now to sign up for a one-on-one with Leon. Which I think he's going to talk more about in just a minute. And I think it's going to end up in the chat, but this is definitely one that you want to talk to if you are getting ready to embark on some fundraising. And if you stay tuned, we will talk more about what he's looking for and what stage you should be in when you want to reach out to him. Leon, do you want to actually dip your toe in that real fast? First of all, we always have to cover what SBIR and STTR is for our audience members. This is my maybe third year diving in. I've done some Googling, and I always appreciate a good refresher.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Actually, you totally nailed it in your intro. And if anybody wants to answer the poll that just went out, we can see who knows what and maybe answer some questions. But as you said, there's a big bucket of federal money, almost $4 billion in the past couple of years per year. And it's available to any small business that is doing any kind of science, tech, or other kind of engineering-oriented innovation. And we're really glad to have both Cami and Rachel on the previous panel who have both been successful SBIR awardees. And we're glad to see them getting to the stage where they're now getting to market with their products. So basically Virtue Lab, and I'll give a quick shout out to my colleagues in Virtue Lab who helped organize this event, especially Tricia Clemens and Cassidy Johnston. Thank you very much. But Virtue Lab is a nonprofit that supports startups, including clean tech and climate impact, and companies like Cami's to basically get this kind of funding, as well as with other holistic wraparound support to help them develop their technology and eventually get funded by venture capital. So I work for Virtue Lab, helping companies get SBIR, but one of the first things we always point out is that SBIR grants cover a lot more than just clean tech. It covers life science like Rachel. So please contact me if you are interested at all in any kind of federal funding. And I think some of our questions will tell you a little bit more about when the right time is. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you. So we've got these poll questions that just popped in. Most people, 73%, awesome, have heard of SBIR, STTR funding before. Congrats. We've got a couple of people who have applied, and about 18% are like, well, I don't know. Don't you worry. Stick with us, kids, and we will figure it out. Okay, so for both of you, when you are and Himalaya, I'd love to start with you. So when you are evaluating your applicant, what are you looking for? What stage, what's the ideal business profile when an entrepreneur is approaching you? Himalaya, I'd love to go to you first, and then it's quite different on Leon's end. So Leon, I'd love for you to answer that question too. What are you looking for and what stage should the entrepreneur be at when they're approaching you?
Sure. And I am answering this, as Lindsay mentioned, I do work with Portland Seed Fund. I also run and manage the Black Founders Matter Fund. And so those two answers might be a little bit different, but about in the same realm when you think about venture capital. So when you're thinking about both of those funds, it's a seed stage fund. And so when you're thinking about that, it's when you've already gotten some level of product development and you've gotten some level of market validation. Right. And so when you think about, and you'll compare and contrast what Leon says with what I'm saying, this is not necessarily something where you just have an idea and then you want to get capital.
Let me interrupt you. What does market validation mean?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. So it can mean a lot of things, right? Because that's a pretty vague term. But one thing that you want to establish really early on is the ability for you to showcase your product market fit. And so that means your product or service is meeting an unmet need in the market. And how did you validate that? It didn't just come from your head. Specific customers in the industry were able to validate that. And if you don't have customer validation, and I will say this, let me back up and say, customer revenue is always the #1 driver of market validation, always. But if you don't have that, there are other ways to also be able to demonstrate market validation. There are customer intents. There's also strategic partnerships. So a lot of times, especially if you're going into deep science or clean tech, there's a longer go-to-market pathway because maybe there's regulatory hurdles and there's a lot of testing involved. So maybe you aren't in market yet and you don't have customer validation, but you can have letters of interest from customers. You can have letters of intent from customers. You can also have strategic partnerships that you are doing within that testing and R&D phase that demonstrate that there's other people in the market that are also validating simultaneously that this is an unmet need in the market. So that's what I mean by market validation. And then in terms of product development, it's the actual physical development of your product or service. And when we talk about that, we mean when it's your physical product, it's a little bit easier to say, right? It's like, have you built your product? Have you at least built something that is an MVP? When you're thinking about that in relation to a product and service, you're also thinking about the revenue model. So a lot of times, founders will come to us and pitch to us and say, this is our idea, this is our product, and go really, really deep into the product. But have you also thought in terms of product development about the business end of it? What is your revenue model? How do you make money from this? Who is your target customer? All of those things need to be a little bit more firmly developed before you can approach a venture fund. So I'm sure I talked a little bit more than what you asked, Lindsay, and I'm happy to clarify any items.
No, that's actually fantastic, and I think it's a really good opportunity as we welcome some of the other people up on stage to talk to you, Himalaya, and then Leon. Again, as we're welcoming the other panelists on, we're going to get ready to transition into our all panelists time. We talk a lot about funding gaps for women founders, and oh gosh. The last 5 to 10 years that I have been having that conversation, and certainly a part of the conversation, closing the gap, both women in the workplace and then most certainly as an entrepreneur myself, closing that gap as a woman founder. Can you, Himalaya, talk to me about what you feel like is driving that gap, and not spend so much time there, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are about what it looks like to actually close it. What can we do? What are we doing? What are some of the things that you're seeing in your industry that are bringing that equality and more access? And how can we open that up even more? And Leon, I'll throw that to you also, because I know you do a lot of great work in that space.
Absolutely. So I'm happy to tackle this very large, very systemic problem and preface that by saying it is large and systemic. And so my one answer will never, ever be enough to cover the huge issues that we have here. one of the things I give a whole talk on this, especially around investment into people of color and women, has remained largely unchanged in the last 10 years. And when we think about so many different platforms and funds that have emerged to be able to solve that issue, we also wonder, like, why have there been unchanged outcomes? And what I really have dived deep into is, even when there's a willingness by funds and funders to be able to invest diversely and invest differently, there are so many different systemic and evaluation barriers that create a no difference in the actual outcome. And so one of the ways that we at Black Founders Matter have thought to do that is, one, we've totally revamped the evaluation process to be able to create a different criteria. One of the things that's really difficult about venture capital is usually you can't pitch to a venture capital fund until you get a referral. And that's inherently classist because you need to know someone wealthy and well-connected to be able to then get more money, right? And so what we've tried to do is to be able to create cold outreach channels and transparency, more transparency in exactly what is the criteria for you to be eligible for this fund, transparency in the eligibility, as well as access points so that you as someone without a referral can apply and be heard and be able to pitch in front of Black Founders Matter if you read the eligibility criteria and you self-select. That's one part. The second part, and this is something that I developed in my career as a venture capital consultant, is the idea of evaluating a startup. So oftentimes we see this also with tech. So there's lots of funds that are specific cluster focuses, not on tech. They're on like food, they're on health and wellness, but the investors inherently have this bias towards looking at something and evaluating it as if it were tech. And so when you evaluate something as if it were something, then inherently you will always create a bias and a shift towards something that mimics that of tech. And we've done the same thing when it comes to racial and gender equity. We've created funds and we've created willing investors that want to invest in people of color and women. But our evaluation frameworks are that are based off of a subset of what it looks like to be successful from a white male standpoint. And so when you think about how people of color and how women present their ideas, when you think about the type of ideas that they want to pursue, they're definitely different. And we don't do a good job of creating different types of evaluation metrics for different types of startups. And so that's also something that we're working on. What we can do to do better. One, I will say this and I will say it loud and proud. When you hear, we just can't find people of color, we just can't find women, you're not looking hard enough. If you can't find them, you need to do a better job of looking for them. And granted, most funders don't have the inherent networks and connections to be able to access different types of women, different types of people of color. Well, then partner with organizations and funds who already have that network and who are doing the work on the ground to connect you to those founders. And so that's something that we've been doing even with larger funds. There's a huge mandate because of the racial justice focus in 2020. There's been lots of funds that have said, we really want to diversify our portfolio, but we're looking and we just can't find them. And that's where Black Founders Matter has really stepped in to say, if you can't find them, partner with us because we are on the ground and we are helping to find them. And so I would say that.
Yeah, I say this all the time, as opposed to starting something new, which is an interesting, I think, approach. A lot of existing funding establishments, they'll be like, oh, we'll just start one new and it's for Black people. And we'll put these people that we've worked with in the past in place and then we'll task them with it. And it's like, what you want to start exists already. So find them and fund them and then mentor them into, what it looks like to be a business that is on the same field as you, if necessary. And I think it's interesting to discover that usually it's not. Okay, awesome. I would love to get the ladies up on the stage as we hear from Leon in terms of some of the things he's seeing in his space around getting more money to underrepresented founders. Yeah, I'm excited to welcome the ladies back. Leon, take it away.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. And I'm actually glad that Himalaya built such a strong foundation of explaining the whole ecosystem of funding, and I'll just really quickly add on to what she said, and that in the communities where I am working, primarily science and engineering and product development oriented earlier stage work, the what I'm typically seeing, if you're encountering systematic and institutional roadblocks to getting to a more equitable and inclusive kind of community, you have to look at the whole system. And so, simply exactly like what you said, Lindsay, it's like you can't just go out and expect a fully formed 40-year-old entrepreneur with experience and education to already have the invention that you want to seek grant funding for. We have to look at the whole system. And by that, I mean not just investing in STEM, getting more women and people of color in positions like deans of universities, but even things like having all of us, the ecosystem mentors and providers of services, be more diverse, as well as things like having review panels for the grants and contracts that provide that funding be more diverse. And I've actually seen the federal agencies, NSF is a super good one at promoting that kind of agency, really make a concerted effort to look for more women and program managers and diverse people on both their review committees and their staff. And you can go straight to the NSF SBIR website and look at the profile of all the project managers. And I think that really helps. So anyway, I'd be glad to say a lot more. I've been continually pasting the link for one-on-ones and Virtue Labs SBIR program into the chat. And I'll do it one more time before we go. But I'd be happy to both answer questions and network and schedule follow-ups for anybody who wants to. Thanks.
I'm very excited about the upcoming speed networking. I hope that you will stick around and join us. You will have the opportunity to not only network with one another as audience members, but you might just end up with one of us here on the stage. So definitely stick around for that opportunity. And we have an incredible question from Tanya, and I think it would just, it's sort of perfect to transition a little bit back into the product space and entrepreneurship space. So thank you, Tanya, for your question. How do you, and this is for the ladies on the panel, how do you balance product development, fundraising, hiring, managing and developing a team, and then company culture? Woo. I mean, I can't remember, I think it might've been Paula that mentioned wearing all of the different hats as a solopreneur, especially when you're first starting out. So what has your experience been? Do you have any pointers, tips, best practices of what it looks like to manage it all? And I might have a little something to add into that, but I would love to hear from anyone on the panel, Rachel, Cami, Paula, and even Himalaya and Leon. If you have people in your portfolio that you think do it really well, I would love to hear your tips.
So I'll go really quick. Yeah, when I was getting started, and I still wear a lot of hats now. It was very, very hard. I was doing the product development. I was not only doing the product development, but building out a lab or a pilot plant at the same time. I was trying to figure out funding. I was trying to figure out it all. And so I initially just said, okay, I'm going to be wearing a lot of hats, which means I need to be kind to myself and do as much as I can, but there might be a couple of key positions that I need to think about right away. So I'll tell you what I thought I did well and a mistake that I made. So I initially said, I was starting to get to the point where I was selling small amounts of product, right? And delivering on our promise and meeting customers' expectations were really important as we were getting started. So the first person that I hired was someone who could be, because again, I'm a consumer-based business, was my customer relations and fulfillment person. So her job was to interact with customers. It was to make sure the orders got filled. It was to at least take that part off of my plate. The second thing was I knew that I couldn't be in the lab all the time if I was going to wear the other hats. So my second hire was to bring on someone who I could at least teach to make the formulas, teach to make and to do some of that batching, because that would take that off of my plate. But then I said, you know what, I've got to run this like a real business, a big business, if you will. And so I brought in someone who was extremely experienced in the beauty space to be my chief operating officer. And I thought that with that team, I could really get it moving. I also took the time to make sure that as we were putting together our policies and procedures and how the business was going to run, that I involved everyone in that decision. But that doesn't mean that everyone is always going to do what you want them to do. And so I think one of the mistakes I made was not really scrutinizing the personality of my chief operating officer. And that became a not only problem for me, but it became a problem for the other two people who were working with me. The dynamic did not work. And so I quickly, well, it wasn't quickly, it was about a year, said, I've got to change this. We can't move forward. And so I ended up having to let that person go and to figure out a different path.
Awesome. Cami, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I am still in the mode of wearing all of the hats. And I guess every day what I do is just prioritize what is the most important thing that I can accomplish today to move my company forward. I look at our customers, I look at the product, and I look at capital. And then I just, I establish priorities and try and execute on those. And I know I do drop balls, but I just try to not drop important balls. So.
Of course, I want to hear from you, Rachel.
I unmuted. So at the beginning, I came from a background of consulting. I consulted for about 10 years. And of course, you're doing everything. And I was just used to doing everything. And when you do that for years, it leads to a little bit of burnout. One thing that happens also is the dance between trying to raise money, and when you raise money, you actually then can hire the people in the team to help you so you don't have to do everything. So Paula nailed it when she talked about building a team and surrounding yourself with the people that can help, take some of the burden off of you, even though you're ultimately responsible for every aspect of the company. You can at least start to get some help as you raise the money. So that's one aspect. And then Cami nailed it when she mentioned prioritizing. That I do that, minute by minute, every day. I just prioritize what's the most important thing I need to be doing right now. And I have things on my to-do list that have been there for 6 months, but it's not a priority. I have to really focus on what's the most important thing. So those two nailed it. And that's my advice as well.
As an entrepreneur who has ADD, ADHD in a very major way, one of the things that I've done, yes to the prioritizing, yes to the team building. I have learned, Paula, you're singing my song, getting that really efficient team that can tell you what needs to be done versus asking you what needs to be done. It's a whole thing. But the thing that has been the most monumental to me as a solopreneur, and I am currently transitioning from being a solopreneur, meaning, producing a show and all that goes along with that, fundraising, doing the actual, business elements of the business, and then all of the creative. Time management was really what it was for me. Full disclosure, I don't have children and I'm not partnered. So I have way more command of my schedule. And as an entrepreneur and as a person, we have way more autonomy of our schedules than we think, especially when we transition from working full time, like the 9 to 5 thing. Moving into entrepreneurship, you don't have the same, work energy or work community. It's just you're trying to figure it out. So I had to, and I've developed this over several years, and I literally teach classes. I have zones of my calendar, and literally every single day, we're talking Monday through Sunday, I have a wake up zone that's 4 hours, and I just do self-care, wake up, me stuff. From 10 until 2, it's my create zone, which means I'm not answering email, I'm not on social media, I'm actively writing, I'm actively product developing, I'm actively ideating, I'm actively reviewing, I'm actively working on the business. And then from 2 to 6 is my task and meeting zone. And that is when I will check emails, run errands, the little tiny things that sort of throw people off paths when they're in a workflow. I save all that for the afternoon. And then I have the rest of my schedule that's more for you know, social life and whatever else. But I have these zones of my schedule where what needs to happen in my business is in the zones. I don't know what that priority is going to be that day, but I know as soon as I know what the task is, I know exactly where to put it in my calendar. I hope that wasn't confusing, but I invite you to reach out to me if that spoke to you on Instagram at @ILindsayMurphy. I teach this class almost monthly. So, you know, if you wanted to check that out, you're more than welcome to do that. But time management, and for me as someone who has ADHD and is highly creative and strives to be highly productive, while also having a life, for me, it was my calendar. Oh, good. Thanks, Himalaya. Thanks for that support. And now I have a question for everyone, since we have everyone together on the panel. Have any of you worked together? Leon, I'm looking at you. And what was that process like?
Actually, I connected several times with Cami in the process of her doing her SBIR, but we eventually, partly because she had such great potential, handed her off to our 40-year veteran expert contract grant writer. But we are still definitely in a working together mode. Rachel, I was pleased to meet through this event and through a road tour, a national event that stopped in Portland that she was nice enough to come to. But that's it for me. I would look forward to working more with either Himalaya or Paula if the opportunity is right.
Any of our entrepreneurs, have any of you worked on any of these? Okay, great. So what advice do you have for maybe 1 to 3 pieces of advice for burgeoning entrepreneurs? And they can be best practices from you. They can be funding tips. They can be work tips, whatever it is. What are about 1 to 3 pieces of advice that you would have for those who are in or entering the entrepreneurship journey? And if anyone has any questions, we're getting ready to transition into our networking phase in about 3 to 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, anything at all, please make sure you put it in the chat box. Happy to answer in the next couple of minutes. And I'm going to go to Rachel. I would love to hear from Rachel.
Is this the badass piece of advice that you told us to think about?
Oh, yeah.
Or is that different? Okay, so I did write a couple notes real quick about my badass piece of advice. I think, you know, this is something that I've sort of learned throughout the process of being an entrepreneur, and also just sort of growing up as a human, woman, Native person. When you feel like you don't fit in the business environment or the engineering environment or something like that, it's really important to learn how to embrace being different. And when you're an entrepreneur, creating a company based on your own values and not feeling like you have to do things the way people tell you to do or the way you think you're supposed to do it. You know, just really embrace being different, thinking different. We're talking about funding earlier, and you know, something like 2% of VC dollars go to women founders. Well, that's where we all have to get real creative in how we get money and do things. And maybe we change the way that business operates because of our ingenuity and creativity in being different. So that's just, you know, I guess maybe that was about 3 pieces of advice.
And I'd like to just build on what Rachel is just saying, because that, you know, one of my thoughts is people want to do business with people. Like they don't want to do business with companies. And so I think that it's okay to let your true authentic self come through and your personality. And even maybe in the corporate world, that wasn't something that, you know, quote unquote fit in. But in the entrepreneur world, that's where creativity comes in, and that's where your own perspective on how to address a market or solve a problem creates innovation. So I, you know, just again, based upon what Rachel is saying, just be comfortable being your authentic self.
That is the ultimate badass advice, Cami. Thank you. Paula, I would love to hear your badass advice.
You know what? I think Rachel and Cami really captured it for me. I mean, and it speaks to everything I have ever done as a female Black scientist who also loves beauty products. It is really important to be passionate about what you do, and that comes through when you are your authentic self. And when you see a place where you feel like you can make a difference in the world or with a product, to pursue it, because there are going to be high highs and low lows. So being comfortable with that, I think, is really, really, really important. And it is important to share your perspective. And your perspective is not going to be the same as everyone else's perspective in most cases. And that's your true point of differentiation. So to embrace it. And I'd say the last thing for me to add on to what was said was that I learned along the way the difference between advice and opinions. And it's really important to know the difference between advice and when it is simply someone's opinion.
I was trying to type that into the little chat box because woo, that hit my spirit. Okay, yes. And Paula, you're reminding me, if I may toss in my semi-badass piece of advice, piggybacking off of Paula, there's a massive difference between advice and an opinion. And also for me, I strive not to take advice from people who have not done what I'm trying to do or something that looks like it. Of course, everyone is entering a business and they want it to be, big or not big, but they want it to be successful. Not identify what success looks like to you, because not for everyone a $1 billion buyout is success. For some people, a lifestyle business or a business that makes, in the several $1 million zone that they can enjoy and being in, versus something that does scale and does get passed off and does make IPO. Really have clarity on what success looks like to you. And then seek the advice of people who have similar levels of success. One of the things that I learned early on, and I'm going to take a cue from Tanya for asking that awesome question of how do you balance it all? I was taking, work style and lifestyle advice and cues from people who were overworked and didn't see their families. And there were just different things that I would not have said, oh, this is a successful person. Even if they are making all the money, they're in command, they're the boss or whatever it is, and they are happy. For me, success looks like balance. It looks like having time and space for all the things that matter. So I look to people who have balance in their life and I seek their advice. I don't take advice or valuation metrics from people who don't have what I would call successful. Feeling bad about how quickly or not quickly I'm working on something based on someone who has a totally different set of valuation parameters and fulfillment meters and all those other things. So take advice from people who want something like what you have versus anybody else. So that's my piece of advice. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much to this incredible panel of people. If you want to reach out to Leon, make sure you check out the link that he has put in the chat box. Keep your eyes out in the chat box over the next couple of minutes. If any of the panelists want to put their Instagram or websites in the chat box for our audience members to take a look at as we transition to our awesome team with VirtuLab and Women in Science PDX to go into our speed networking. I will be there and I hope you will too.